What if the British never colonized India? It's one of the biggest what-ifs in world history because when you erase nearly 200 years of foreign rule from a country as vast, rich, and diverse as India, you're not just rewriting a few chapters, you're rewriting the whole book. So let's imagine what would India and the world look like today if colonization had never happened. To begin with, India before colonization wasn't a primitive backwater, as some colonial narratives claimed. It was one of the richest economies on earth. In the early 18th century, just before British dominance began, India made up nearly a quarter of the world's GDP. Its textiles were world famous. Its trade routes stretched across Asia and Europe. It had advanced systems of governance, education, and public works under various kingdoms and empires. Without colonization, that economic trajectory might have continued. Instead of having its industries dismantled to serve British interests like the forced collapse of the textile industry, India could have industrialized on its own terms. Indian merchants, artisans, and innovators could have fueled an indigenous industrial revolution. By the 20th century, India might have been an economic superpower, not a country struggling under the weight of poverty and partition. But economics is just one part of the story. Without colonization, India's political evolution would likely have been very different. The British used divide and rule tactics that deepened religious and regional tensions that eventually led to the partition of India and Pakistan in 1947, one of the bloodiest events in modern history. If India had charted its own political course, it's possible that Hindu-Muslim unity movements, which existed even before the British, could have developed into a more inclusive federal system, one that respected regional identities while maintaining national unity. Maybe the Indian subcontinent would still be one nation today, or maybe a South Asian Union, something like the European Union, could have emerged. And then there's the question of education and culture. Under British rule, traditional Indian knowledge systems were often devalued or destroyed. Sanskrit, Persian, Tamil, these were once the languages of science, poetry, mathematics, and medicine. What if they had continued to evolve without colonial disruption? India might have led the world in philosophy, astronomy, literature, and medicine. Imagine a world where Ayurvedic research existed alongside Western medicine as an equal, not as a side note. Imagine Indian universities that rivaled Oxford and Harvard, rooted in indigenous wisdom but open to the world. Of course, it's not all utopia. India's history was never free from conflict. Even before the British, there were wars between kingdoms, power struggles, and class divisions. Colonization didn't invent inequality, but it did systematize it, exploit it, and profit from it. A non-colonized India would still have challenges. There might have been internal conflicts, rivalries, and even wars. But those conflicts would have played out on India's terms, not for the benefit of an empire across the sea. And globally, a strong independent India from the 1800s onward would have shifted the balance of power. Maybe colonialism as a whole would have been weakened. Other Asian and African nations might have looked to India as a model of resistance or partnership. The Cold War might have played out differently. The tech boom could have had a South Asian center. Global culture, art, and cinema might have flowed outward from Mumbai or Kolkata, not just Hollywood or London. So what do we lose when a country is colonized? We don't just lose wealth, sovereignty, or lives, we lose futures. Futures that could have been innovations that were never born, stories that were never told. And what we gain by imagining these futures is not just insight, it's power. The power to recognize how history shapes the present and how we might reshape what comes next. Because history isn't just what happened, it's also what could have happened. And sometimes asking what if is the first step toward asking what now.